Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Hello everyone, welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, Episode 8, Voter Suppression. My name, as your temporary host for today, is Sam Whalen. I'm joined by my co-host, Joseph Whalen.
Thank you, Sam, and if you do a good enough job, it might not be temporary.
We will see what happens. Before we get to today's topic, just a couple of things I want to mention. Make sure to subscribe to us on all your podcast services. That includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else you get your podcasts around the globe. Most importantly, if you are watching on Twitch or watching the rebroadcast and you have Amazon Prime, that means you have Twitch Prime, so you can give us the Twitch Prime subs, and they do help us out a lot. Contact information, if you want to email us, you can email us at comments at I'll just try that again. Comments at insightsintothings.com. Twitter, we are at insights_things. We can find the video on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Like I said, we are streaming 6 days a week on Twitch, twitch.tv/insightsintothings. Audio is going to be on podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, Facebook, Insights Into Things podcast. And finally, links to all these, if you missed any of them, are on www.insightsintothings.com. Thank you so much for watching.
Let me correct one thing there. It's actually the audio's podcast.insights into tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Insights in Entertainment is our other show.
Oh, oops. Well, support all the shows. But for this one, Insights into Tomorrow.
There we go.
It's a mistake on my notes there. So getting into today's topic, we are talking about voter suppression. It is a big topic in the news, so we thought it would be pertinent to cover it. So going over to my co-host, what do you think when you think of voter suppression? What comes to mind for you?
Well, I mean, if I just rip it right out of the headlines at this point in time, it seems to be today interference with the U.S. Postal Service, since we're going to be depending on mail-in voting during the pandemic. But it's a sadly, much richer, deeper history than just what we're seeing today. Even going back to the technology-related stuff from the 2016 election with the emails and the hacking and everything else. So it's much more complicated than what we're seeing today. And what we're seeing today is some pretty sophisticated voter suppression technique.
Yep. Like you mentioned what we're going through today, what's going on in the past, and that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to break things down from the past, the present, and then go ahead and look at the future. So starting off, according to Wikipedia, which I know professors out there are going to get me for citing that, but I think it's a pretty good definition. It says voter suppression in the United States concerns allegations about various efforts, legal and illegal, used to prevent eligible voters from exercising their right to vote. So these things can vary depending on the place, the state, or the method. A lot of the voter suppression is tied directly to voting rights, which started at the beginning of democracy itself. Initially, we'll actually touch on that later. I got mixed up there, so that's just a tease for the past. The current state of voter suppression, we'll look at what President Trump is doing, how he's dealing with the Postal Service, like you mentioned, and how he's using tactics of fear during this pandemic to sort of encourage people how to use their votes and what might happen, and how he's using that to his advantage. And finally, we'll look at the future of things. The 2020 election, what that effect might have on voter apathy, which has been a problem for many years, and how voting laws might be able to change, or how we can hope they can change to allow more people to be able to vote. And so we'll get with the past in just a minute when we come right back. So like I mentioned when I accidentally started to go into the history of things, the history of voting rights goes all the way back to the beginning of American democracy. According to the people over at howstuffworks.com, quote, the U.S. Constitution does not explicitly include a right to vote, which is true. Only the House of Representatives were to be elected by the people, according to the Constitution. So that was where we, the people, could express their right to vote. However, these people were not all people, as you may be imagining. At first, only white, male property owners were able to vote. And that included some free black men later on when slavery was abolished. But even still, which we'll get into later, there were restrictions in place to discourage free black men from voting. Quote, all women, non-African American minorities, and many non-Christian religious groups were denied the franchise. So as you can see here, right from the beginning of the history of voting in America, immediately people were excluded and their votes were suppressed. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's kind of a unfortunate statement that we legislated voter suppression from the day that this company was started. So there's always been this underlying idea that only certain people should have a say in who is elected and how our government is formed. Now that's changed significantly over years, but what we've seen is a evolution of the legal disenfranchisement of people. And I don't know, maybe I'm idealistic by thinking that over 200 years later, we might finally have it right, but it seems like we still aren't doing what we need to do in order to get people the ability to vote.
Yeah, so following the Civil War, there was the era of Reconstruction, which was basically the country trying to put itself back together. You had a lot more free blacks in the South gaining sources of power for a little while, until a lot of that was done away with the Dixiecrats in 1877, when the imposing of Jim Crow laws, which were designed to specifically restrict the black vote in the South and in other places. In addition to that, the 15th Amendment allowed voting regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Ideally, unfortunately, as we see with these Jim Crow laws, things like literacy test, poll taxes, and straight violence or intimidation were employed to discourage African Americans to vote. And those literacy tests, a lot of free blacks did not know how to read because they were never taught. And poll taxes, a lot of them were economically disenfranchised as well. So that also excluded them from the right to vote. According to, again, the people at How Things Work, quote, only 3% of voting age African American Southerners were registered to vote in 1940. So this is well after, almost 100 years after the Civil War ended. Excuse me. And still only 3% of voting age African American Southerners were registered to vote. Now, in 1965, jumping ahead in the timeline, we had the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which did do away with a lot of the Jim Crow laws and allowed women and minority votes to open up, which did help to make voting more equal and allow more of the people to expand that definition. However, this story doesn't end there. As anyone that studied history knows, racism and oppression did not just simply disappear with the civil rights movement of the 1960s. New voter suppression methods are still in use today. Common modern voter suppression techniques. There are voter registration problems. So if you can't register to vote, you can't vote at all. So not all states require registration. There's also confusion on where and when to register and confusion over what you need to register. So different documents and qualifications can change state to state, which if people don't have access to something like a birth certificate or a passport, either by financial reasons or just a lack of it, then that's going to stop them from being able to vote. Voter purges. These laws vary state by state. States can purge voters from registration if they haven't voted in as few as 2 years. Purge is done selectively to disenfranchise minority groups. So we'll touch more on later voter apathy, and this plays directly into that. Basically, if you haven't voted in 2 years, they can nullify your vote, which presidential elections are every 4 years. And there's a case to be made there that that 2-year limit might be intentional because I'd say the biggest election is the presidential election. It's what most people vote in, ideally. So by doing it every 2 years, you're going to be able to wipe out a lot of voters that would then need to re-register, which we just touched on could be difficult for different people. What are your thoughts on just these early, more subtle ways of getting people to taking away the ability to vote?
Well, and I think a lot of it is the convenience factor, what we're talking about here. The need, there's a certain requirement that you have to have because everyone's always very worried about voter fraud. That's what's getting thrown out now. So you come up with laws that on the face of them are intended to combat voter fraud, but really the underlying purpose is to make it inconvenient and difficult for people to register or to get to the polls and vote. And the one thing that your typical politicians don't want is an educated, energetic, and enthusiastic voting population. The fewer votes they have to worry about is the less effort they have to make in order to influence those votes. So by cutting back that number, and all of these laws really are designed to do that, is to cut back that number of voters, it makes it easier for them. If they can control certain segments of the population, like if they can get 50% of the population in Louisiana to not vote, well, then they don't need to spend money campaigning down there. All they have to do is get them to not vote. Because if they're not voting for me, then they're not voting for my opponent either. Then, as an economic equation, they can go spend that money someplace else. And as a result, the citizens of the country lose out as a result.
Yep, absolutely. And as we often end up to the conclusion on the show, always follow the money. That's typically where you'll go. So yeah, definitely moving those funds around can help their campaigns. Going back to the modern ways of voter suppression, strict voter ID and ballot requirements. So these laws, again, vary state by state. Some states require government-issued IDs to vote, and this was a big thing in the news a while back, voter ID laws, and it's still a very important issue, especially with the upcoming election. But basically, these impede low-income, disabled, and immigrant residents who may not be able to get a government-issued ID, whether it be because of a physical disability, a lack of money, or immigration status in general. In addition to that, voter confusion, misinformation from political parties to confuse voters, messaging from official and unofficial polling can be confusing and inconsistent, incorrect ballots invalidate voters' choices. We had a little bit of that with Bush and Gore in the 2000 election, I think. Somewhere around there?
Sure.
Earlier than that, maybe. But yeah, the hanging Chad with the miscounted ballots.
Yep.
So even if you get your vote in, it might just be counted wrong, And we don't really have that as much of an issue today because that incident did make different methods of voting that were more secure, more popular. There is still instances of voter intimidation and harassment. Racially motivated scare tactics are employed to prevent citizens from voting. Fake robocalls from hate groups pretending to be candidates, and inappropriate questioning at polling locations to intimidate voters. I mean, there's incidents of this up into the 2012 election with Barack Obama, groups going around trying to intimidate people of color from voting to help sway the vote in the other side. Poll closures and long lines. This one pretty much speaks for itself. If the polls are closed, then nobody can go there to vote. And again, it goes back to what you said about inconvenience, right? I mean, if you have to walk, if you've got no way to transport yourself and you have to walk 5 miles to the polling station and you get there and it's closed, you're not going to walk 25 miles to the next one. And that's kind of a common theme here. You'll see a lot of these a lot of these laws and tactics are specifically targeting people less fortunate in life, whether that be minorities or people financially less well off. Malfunctioning voting equipment, so sometimes things will be tampered with, whether that be the voting machines or the external attacks of computerized voting, now that most things are electronic. Those can be targeted as well. So disenfranchisement of justice-involved individuals. So felons, approximately 6 million Americans, are barred from voting due to felony convictions that disenfranchise them. So if you're convicted of a felony, any felony, you cannot vote in this country. And that excludes 6 million Americans from being able to vote. And again, the laws vary state by state. And I'm sure that we could probably make a whole show about the ethics of whether felons should be able to vote. I personally think they should, because even if you are a terrible felon of some degree, I don't think it should be a clear-cut line of no matter what you did, as long as you're marked felon, you cannot vote. I think it's not as black and white as that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I have kind of a fundamentalist view on this, in that in order to have a civilized society in which citizens vote for the type of government that they want, there are laws, and you have to abide by those laws. And once you choose to no longer abide by those laws, you have to sacrifice a certain amount of protection that you would get under a society like that. And one of those protections, I think, really should be your voting. You know, if you are a convicted felon, you've chosen to not abide by society's laws, so you shouldn't be able to take part in shaping those laws at that point. Now, that's not to say that if you're a convicted felon, do your time, come out, and you're reformed, you shouldn't be able to vote. I think you should. But I don't think we should be rolling voting machines into a prison where people have chosen to not abide by their civic duty by being law-abiding citizens, because they're not the kind of people that I want voting people into office, because they're going to vote people into the office that are going to be most advantageous to them, which by definition is least advantageous to a civilized society. But that's just my personal opinion.
No, that's understandable. I mean, if, like you said, if they're the felons that are still serving their time and have committed horrible crimes, then no, they shouldn't be able to vote. But then it's when you run into the people that have served their time but are still marked as felon, that those people also being excluded, it makes you wonder where that line is drawn.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. Like the purpose of our penal system is to punish but reform. And if you're reformed to the point that we can put you back into everyday society, then you should be reformed to the point that you should be able to vote and be a participating member of society again. It's a fundamental right.
Absolutely. So we do have one more tactic here. We've got gerrymandering, which is politicians manipulate voting redistricting in ridiculous ways to shape the voting pools. This is a pretty blatant attempt to manipulate the voting population and has direct and lasting impact on election results. So you can look up pictures of this where districts are, I mean, they're literally maps of locations, and they're drawn in such a way that a certain politician will be able to get more votes because of the way the district is drawn. And it's changing and moving these lines around, which is done constantly, that allows for votes to be moved around and pulled in certain areas. And it's like we have here, a blatant attempt to manipulate the voting population, and an all too popular one. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get into the current conditions and the source and symptoms of how voter suppression is used today.
Before we jump out, though, I did want to mention, a different view on gerrymandering. While it's definitely something that's used to manipulate voter bases, I think it really epitomizes what most of our problems are with voter suppression right now. And that is, one, your ability to elect people into office, the legal rights of that vary so much from state to state, especially when you're electing someone of a federal office, a senator, a congressman, or a president. The laws in your local area can vary significantly from across the country, which is one of the problems. There's no consistency in the law. The other is that gerrymandering highlights probably the biggest problem we have, and that is the people that are making the laws for how we vote and how we elect politicians are the very politicians that are affected by them. So as a result, you have to assume, quite rightly, that the lawmaking when it comes to this type of event is going to be advantageous first and foremost to the politicians and not the citizens. So to me, that's why it was perfect having gerrymandering last, because it really rolls up all the problems that we have and symbolizes it in one single thing there, even though that itself is its own problem.
Yeah, definitely. And it really, I mean, obviously we're pretty cynical on this show, but all these tactics made by the people in power, specifically designed to keep them in power and to prevent voting, is so contrary to what you'd think the typical American view of democracy is, where everybody gets a say, everybody gets an equal say, and your vote matters. And clearly, as we're seeing here, your vote is manipulated and controlled in a variety of ways, not the least of which is moving maps and changing maps to get more power, to either prevent or to corral your vote. And it's anti-American in a way, really.
Everyone is equal, but there are those who are more equal than others.
Exactly. And as we'll see coming up, we have some specific examples of some of the methods we just mentioned that we will highlight that are more concrete examples of voter suppression.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back, everybody. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about voter suppression today. We just got through the history and some of the more modern techniques used to do it, and we're going to get into some more real-world examples of how it worked. So, in one of the most important tactics used for voter suppression is the use of disinformation, and that is a very broad umbrella thing that is used to manipulate everybody in a variety of ways nowadays. But with voter suppression, it comes down to the highly popular and effective modern methods used. So in 2008, the 2008 elections, Democrats in Nevada received robocalls informing them that they could vote on November 5th. This was a day after the election, to avoid the long lines. So basically, all these people in Nevada got fake calls telling them a fake date for the real election. And this did impact the amount of votes that came in Nevada, because a bunch of people showed up the next day to vote for an election that was already over and already won. So what are your thoughts on this example? Have you experienced any kind of robocalls for voting?
I have not. Somehow I've managed to get off of all the calling lists for robocalls. And I think it's probably because a couple that I had in the past did not end well for the caller. I don't take political ads very well when people bother me with them. Although I'm getting hammered with spam. I will say that, because it's so much easier to get through to people. But this is exactly the tactics that I was referring to earlier, where if they can get those numbers down, then it's so much easier for them to control the people that they know they can get their votes from. And a lot of times the people that they target are the lower income, lesser privileged individuals, because those are an unknown quantity to politicians. Politicians like guarantees. And the people that are willing to commit to funding their campaign and contributing to their campaign or showing up to their rallies, they're the ones that they know they don't have to convince them. But the people that are lower income people can't afford to contribute to campaigns, so they don't have a list of, these people as known good people. So let's just make sure they don't vote at all. We'll grab the smaller group that we know we have, and we'll run with that. So this is a very typical technique I'd expect to see.
Yeah, and again, like you just mentioned, we're seeing more of that targeting of people that are less financially well off or minority groups, and it goes hand in hand with the voter suppression we're seeing today. Speaking of today, it's difficult to talk about this without mentioning President Trump. And if you've been reading the news or staying current with the news, most recently, President Trump went on Fox Business Network and explicitly noted 2 funding provisions that Democrats are seeking in a relief package that has stalled on Capitol Hill. Trump said without the additional money, the Postal Service won't have the resources to handle a flood of ballots from voters who are seeking to avoid polling places during the coronavirus pandemic. This is courtesy of ABC7.com. So this is the big reason we wanted to talk about this topic today. President Trump has been very vocal about his distrust in mail-in ballots and his efforts to dismantle the Postal Service and discredit them have been enormous, to say the least. So now, in this most recent interview, Trump, his quote is, "If we don't make a deal, that means they don't get the money," he told host Maria Bartiromo. Sorry if I mispronounced that name. He goes on to say, quote, "That means they can't have universal mail-in voting, they just can't have it," end quote. So Trump is essentially admitting there that he is intentionally withholding funds from the Postal Service to prevent the ability for people to mail in their votes, which is going to be a critical way of collecting votes during the coronavirus pandemic coming up in the November election. What are your thoughts on his comments here?
Well, I actually, and you mentioned earlier that we're cynical here, and we probably are, but I think the actions of our politicians warrant it at this point. I can't help but think that this goes much deeper than just the U.S. Postal Service, because these threats against the U.S. Postal Service wouldn't work if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic where people were afraid to go to public polling places. So if you step back and take a look at it from a 30,000-foot standpoint, you have to wonder, was the whole COVID-19 pandemic manufactured to set up this ability to suppress voters now? Because the voting suppression technique, because the first thing he did was come out and tell us over and over without a single piece of evidence that mail-in voting was ripe for fraud. There's no evidence because it's never been done before. What we do have evidence of is absentee ballots, and the fraud percentage of absentee ballots is minuscule.
Yeah, I actually have a number here, just really quick. In the past 20 years, 0.00006% of all mail-in ballots cast were fraudulent. Quote, "There is no support for the argument that mail-in voting is a problem." This comes from Lorraine Midnight, a political science professor at Rutgers University. So there's your statistic right there.
Right.
It's a negligible number in the past 20 years of mail-in ballots that were fraudulent.
Right. So his first claim that it's fraud didn't pan out. Right. You tell a lie big enough and often enough, people start to believe it. Well, no one believed this one because there was so much supporting evidence to shoot it down. So now he knows that he can't set this up as a legal challenge to say, oh, it's fraud. So instead, he switches to his next tactic of, well, let's just make sure people can't do it. I can't legally do it. He can't legally stop people from doing the mail-in voting, especially when you have governors who are already sending the ballots out. So he declares a state of emergency so that he can defund the post office. Now, just to put things into perspective right now, he declares a state of emergency so he can sign an executive order that allows him to basically shut the Postal Service down to a certain extent to impede people's ability to mail in ballot. We have over 165,000 people dead in this country now as a result of the COVID-19 virus, and we still haven't gotten a state of emergency declared on that. So it's to me, it's painfully obvious that our current administration is employing tactics that we would expect to see from third world petty dictators to try to hold on to power. And right now, to a large extent, his opponents, the Democrats, are powerless to stop him because they only control part of the Senate and Congress. I think it's important to note that should Donald Trump get reelected, even to another 4 years, after those 4 years, or even after this election, Donald Trump is out of the political spotlight. He has no political ties. He has no political backers. He has no political control. He has only what he has right now. So as a result, all of these Republicans that are hitching their wagons to Donald Trump and defending him and supporting him through all these clearly illegal actions are going to be left high and dry. Whether it's after this election or the next, they still need to get reelected. And when you choose the wrong side of history and you do it in such a spectacularly public way, it's going to come back. There's going to be a toll that has to be paid for that. And that's going to be in the number of seats that the Republicans will see in the Senate moving forward when Donald Trump isn't around anymore. Now, I don't want to turn into a political consultant here or anything like that, but the point I'm trying to make here is that we have a president here who really is employing tactics that they've gone beyond questionable. I mean, they were questionable 4 years ago. Now they're downright illegal. And you have Congress feels like it's powerless to do anything about it. And if Congress feels that way, how do you think the average voting American feels? And that in and of itself is a form of voter suppression.
Yeah, exactly. And it's definitely, I think that's one of the biggest things we're dealing with today. And voter apathy comes right with that. We see a president doing whatever he wants with basically no repercussions or limits, blatantly making moves to ensure his power for whoever knows how long, suppressing votes, and then telling reporters, yeah, I'm doing this on purpose and it's working. And voter apathy was already a big issue in this country. I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that in the past couple presidential elections, voter numbers have been going down because people feel like their votes don't matter. And especially in 2016 with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, when it was Trump got the Electoral College to declare him the winner. And I think that was a really harsh blow to the voting fervor in America because Hillary Clinton got the popular vote and lost.
Well, so, and that's not the first time that's happened in history. That happened in 2000 as well when Bush, took office and Al Gore had the popular vote, and it's happened in the past.
Yeah.
But every time it has happened, people feel disenfranchised. People start to question whether we really need the Electoral College because we needed it 150, 200 years ago because of the limitations that we had. Do we really need it now? But, it's going to take an act of Congress and a constitutional amendment to do away with it. So that's not going to happen. But you still have people that are left wondering, why should I vote?
Yep. Yeah, and that's, as you said, another form of voter suppression. So moving on, there's this documentary on, I believe it's on Netflix, right?
Netflix, yeah.
Called The Great Hack, and it deals with Facebook, Cambridge analytical data scandal. It's a good watch. If it's a little leaning to one side, but I think it's still very informative. It came out end of last year, I think, November, October. Yeah. So essentially, it details how the Trump campaign engaged with Cambridge Analytica, which is a tech company, a data analyst company, to micro-target and influence the 2016 election. Cambridge Analytica was employed to influence elections in over 30 countries prior to the 2016 election. These countries include the United States, the United Kingdom, Argentina, Colombia, Guyana, sorry about that, and Uruguay. Right? Uruguay?
Sure, close enough.
I was never very good at geography. Sorry to those people if you are listening from those countries. So if you do watch this documentary, it pretty blatantly shows, it details what Cambridge Analytica does and how they composite user profiles based on data that people use in any aspect of life, mostly on social media or what they buy online shopping. And they compile all this data and they make it so that people can be targeted more effectively to vote on either side of a political party. So if you like a lot of posts that are left-leaning, then Cambridge takes that data and targets you with more left-leaning ads to further you down that line of thinking. And the same thing with the right. So I think using all that data to further influence people on a larger level is extremely dangerous, and in itself is a form of suppression, because you're being closed-minded. You're being sealed off from other ways of thinking because you're just being further down this rabbit hole to think a certain way. And I think with the rise of how important social media is, especially with President Trump having such an active Twitter account and such a wide social media following, I think these things go hand in hand. And the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal is a clear example of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I give Cambridge Analytica total props, because what they did really was brilliant. They managed to convince Facebook to give them access to all this user information. And it wasn't just a matter of figuring out how to convince someone to vote for a candidate that they wouldn't usually do, which is difficult in and of itself. But they have a storied history in appealing to certain populations with this micro-targeting that they do. And there was one campaign, I believe it was Bolivia. I don't remember entirely, but I think it was Bolivia. It was a Central American, South American country. And the opponent employed Cambridge Analytica to come in to reduce the number of votes for their opponent. They weren't even trying to win votes, because they knew that they had a guaranteed percentage of the population. And they knew all they had to do was to convince a certain portion of the population to not vote. Just don't show up. So Cambridge Analytica used this data from Facebook to bombard a certain young voting population in this country, to basically think, oh, well, it's the cool thing not to vote. Only the old people vote. Only the privileged vote. We're not going to vote. And it convinced enough people to just not show up and vote. Whether they were going to vote for one candidate or the other, the risk that they could have voted for their opponent was all that they needed to stop them from voting. And when this percentage of the population didn't vote, they didn't feel like they were being suppressed. They didn't feel like they were being taken advantage of. They thought they were doing what the cool thing was to do. And that's the psychological advantage that companies like Cambridge Analytica have when they have this data. We make references to comic book references in scenarios a lot of times. And this makes me think of what was it? Captain America.
Oh, Winter Soldier?
Winter Soldier.
Yeah, where they have the shield helicarriers that have all the data and they look at potential targets.
Right.
It's like Minority Report, too. Yeah.
But you have Zola's algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what they had, was they had this magical algorithm that churned all this data and told them who they had to go after and what they had to do. And it worked. The candidate that hired Cambridge Analytica won the election.
Yep.
And it's really something as simple as that, the psychological warfare that they employ, that makes them so dangerous.
Yeah, I think, and you can still see that today, really. I mean, if you get into any kind of social media, like I said before, rabbit hole, where you're exploring, and I'll do that from time to time. Like I'm definitely more left-leaning, so I'll try to go to more right-leaning Twitter accounts, and I follow and I go further and further, and I try to see their point of view and I try to look at those ideas. And you see this kind of manipulation there, whether it be from what I think are real people or just Twitter bots. And Twitter's very particularly bad with it, where there's just bots that just tweet things that are, taking this data and just spitting out words. But this informational suppression and closing off is still apparent today, and it's still unfortunately effective. And I think we are seeing it again with the 2020 election. Yeah. So going back to some of the things we mentioned earlier in terms of modern voter suppression, we touched on it a little bit, but the voter ID legislation, is still very important. This is courtesy of the American Civil Liberties Union. According to them, millions of Americans lack ID. 11% of U.S. citizens, or more than 21 million Americans, do not have government-issued photo identification. So right out of the gate, you have 11% of the population, 21 million people that do not have government-issued photo IDs for whatever reason. And when it comes to voter ID laws, from the get-go, if you don't have a government-issued ID, you can't vote. So that's 21 million people that are simply excluded for one reason or another for not having an ID. Obtaining ID costs money. Even if ID is offered for free, voters must incur numerous costs, such as paying for birth certificates to apply for a government-issued ID. And these costs, while they may seem small to some people, for someone living paycheck to paycheck or that has to support a family, these costs can add up. And when you speak about that voter apathy, those things can sometimes go hand in hand. Well, I need to get a government ID. Well, that's going to cost me $150. That's food for my kids for a week, you know?
Yeah.
So that's stopping some people right there. Underlying documents required to obtain ID cost money, like I just said, a significant expense for lower income Americans. The combined cost of document fees, travel expenses, and waiting time can be anywhere from $75 to $175. So that can be a significant sum of money to a lot of people. The travel required is also a major burden. This can be with people with disabilities, the elderly, or those in rural areas that don't have access to public transportation. Specifically in Texas, some people in rural areas must travel approximately 170 miles to reach the nearest ID office, which if you don't have a car, that's highly unlikely you're going to travel 170 miles on foot.
But those numbers aren't really unusual for Texas. I mean, Texas is a geographic anomaly. You're a half hour from everything in Texas at least.
Definitely. So what are your thoughts on these restrictions and how they can impact the elderly or people without the financial backing?
They're definitely legitimate concerns. My mother was one who never drove, so she never needed a government ID. So when she was told she needed one to register to vote, voting wasn't important to her at that point in time. The only time she wound up getting ID was when she had to open a bank account at one of the local banks, and they required her to have a voter ID or a photo ID. And she had to jump through hoops because you don't have a lot of the same documentation you would normally need in order to obtain those IDs. You look at in New Jersey itself, we need I don't know what the point system is now, but you have to generate documents that are equal to a certain number of points. Well, some of those documents are things that immigrants wouldn't have. You know, if you immigrated here legally from another country, you might not have your birth certificates or your baptismal records or any of the stuff from a country you may have been fleeing from because you're trying to avoid the oppression. You might not have bills in your name. If you live with family, one of a series of documents you could get in New Jersey were any bills that were billed, utility bills, phone bills, gas bills, water bills, that type of thing. Well, if you're a recent immigrant to the country and you can't afford your own home, you may be living with someone and all the bills are in their name, so you can't use those as a form of ID. So this is one of those ones where they use the whole idea of, let's throw out voter fraud. Okay, well, if you can't prove you are who you are, then you shouldn't be allowed to vote because it's going to cause fraud. When statistically speaking, the fraud numbers are insignificantly low. But that's the impetus for using voter ID is to one, scare people from voting. Because if you don't have a voter ID and you walk into a hall, it terrifies people because you're going to be asked for something you don't have. And the reaction that you get, especially in today's volatile law enforcement police environment, that could lead to significant issues that you run into. So that scares people away in and of itself. Not even the fact that I can't even get one of these because I don't have the documentation that's needed. But because we could throw out we can link through some theoretical justification voter fraud with voter ID, then we can justify segmenting that portion of the population often denying them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you kind of made me think of something. I think on this show before I mentioned the concept of how there always has to be an other, right? There always has to be some kind of enemy or some kind of idea to rally people against, whether that be for good or evil. And I think that voter fraud is that other for this, because as you said, the numbers on actual voter fraud are insignificant almost. But the concept of voter fraud, that the worst thing you can do as an American is vote and lie about it, or not vote at all and pretend you're somebody else. When in reality, by using the concept of voter fraud to deter people from voting is the really anti-democracy thing. And it's these levels of mental chess, of manipulation of an entire population of people, and getting it in their head that either your vote doesn't matter or the biggest threat to your democracy is this other. And it's dangerous, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to dig through the vines of all these manipulations. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and look at the future of voter suppression.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back, everybody. We are going to get into the future and potential solutions for how to combat voter suppression. So this article comes from Rolling Stone, and it's just some of the comments that President Trump has made, again, regarding voter suppression and his thoughts on his lawsuits at the time. So in the 2020 election, which is the big thing we have coming up, the RNC has filed over $20 million worth of lawsuits dealing with voting. This is a quote from Rolling Stone. Some attempt to block litigation brought by Democratic groups to expand mail-in voting in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Others seek to invalidate state-level policies by saying that expanding access to mail-in ballots invites fraud. So this is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, how there's this wide effort to discredit mail-in voting. And right here you have the number of $20 million worth of lawsuits dealing with voting. And again, it's the blatant evidence of what President Trump and the administration and the Republican Party in general are doing to discredit mail-in voting. So what are your thoughts on the $20 million worth of lawsuits against this?
I can't help but think how many mailboxes that would pay for to keep on the street.
Yeah.
$20 million.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, we have not only do we have blatant attempts to impede voters from voting, this is the first administration who's ever come out publicly on national television and invited foreign powers to interfere in an American election. How that itself is not treasonous and treated as such, it blows my mind. But when that was not effective enough for him to maintain the numbers that he thought he needed in the polls, which he's still 12 points down, by the way, in the recent Reuters poll, he stepped up the game. So now we're literally pulling mailboxes off the street 3 months in advance of the election. We have sorting machines that are being broken down. We have instructions being given to the Postmaster General that would deliberately make it difficult to count and handle the volume required for mail-in voting. How this is not a criminal offense is beyond me. It really is. And I hope and I pray, and I'm not a very religious individual, but I pray that should the Democrats come out on top in this election, that we don't do something really bad like grant immunity or a pardon to Trump for what he's doing to this country, because this is destroying the country more than anything any outside force has ever done. I've lived through, you've lived through 9/11. We lived through riots. We've lived through, the country has lived through a civil war. And I think what's happening today with how we're treating our democracy and our government is far more dangerous than even the Civil War was. And it's frightening. It really is.
Yeah.
It makes me feel very apprehensive for you and tomorrow's generation and the rest of the younger generation in this country right now. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary prospect, and hopefully, and maybe everything we've covered today might say to the contrary, but hopefully our vote will still matter and our voices will still matter, and that won't go away. And we'll probably touch more on that when we get to our closing statements in just a little bit. But going back to this Rolling Stone article, Rick Hasen, a University of California Irvine law professor and author of Election Meltdown, says the goal of these lawsuits is to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the election, raising spurious fraud claims. So just like we just talked about, the goal is to discredit and disenfranchise and spread disinformation. And speaking of that disinformation, a big common theme has been the use of COVID-19 to stir up fear of the election being in danger, when in reality, these precautions are being taken to save lives, not to harm them. So things like social distancing, the use of mail-in voting, and we've touched on this mostly for the most part already. But basically, there's things being done for COVID-19 are being spun by members of the Trump administration as harming democracy, when in reality, it is, the administration that is the one doing that. Specifically, the group has run ads that warn against risky new methods like mail-in ballots and accuse Wisconsin Democrats of sowing election, quote, chaos after the state's Republicans refused to send every voter an absentee ballot or delay its primary election because of COVID-19. Again, this is from that Rolling Stone article. So in Wisconsin, you're seeing direct targeting of the Wisconsin Democrats because of how they had to handle things because of COVID-19. And in reality, it's not about, it seemed like it was meant to save lives, to prevent the disease from spreading, but it was taken and spun for political gain, which is horrible. And unfortunately, it might have worked for some people.
Well, and I think a lot of what we're seeing out of the current administration is for political gain. The Trump administration still doesn't want to admit we have an issue. Every time Donald Trump addresses any media organization regarding COVID-19, we're told, oh, it's getting better. We're doing great. We're doing fine. The numbers are coming down. And being cynical again, I've come to expect lies from all politicians. More so from Donald Trump. I think he's statistically told more lies and misinformation in office than any other president in the time he's been in office, which is provable. But this series of lies are so blatant and so easily proven wrong that it's almost like he's daring people to challenge him on this. His own administration is having difficulty combating some of the misinformation that he's putting out. It changes. The administration policy statements change multiple times over a 24-hour period because the administration officials come up with a policy. They put Trump in front of the camera, and Trump, it's like short attention span theater. He can't stay on point for more than 5 seconds before he goes off on one of his tirades and one of his rants, and it's counter to what the administration is. So, and he's popular. He very frequently throws out the term of fake news. And it's ironic that he's generating more fake news about everything than is being generated about him. So the messaging itself, the obvious attempts at disinformation, the fact that if something controversial comes up, he's very quick to generate another manufactured controversy over here. You know, everyone pay attention to the new controversy over here and we'll all ignore what was going on. He's a master manipulator when it comes to that. Like it's almost like sleight of hand in a magician, you know, and he's constantly misdirecting people. And the press and America, and I'm sad to say this, are so stupid that they continuously fall for it. And that's why we're in the position that we're in now. Because we're all falling for this misinformation. And until people have the wherewithal to step back and to objectively look at the statements and the claims and do their own research, we're sheep. And that's where one of the biggest problems is today.
Yeah, definitely. And as we kind of come to the end of the show for today, just to wrap things up, just like you said, it's about misinformation and misdirection, just like it has been pretty much any other time we've talked about this administration, regardless of what they're handling. But just a couple things. There is the upcoming 2020 election, so make sure to inform yourself as best you can. And part of informing yourself means looking at what other people that don't think like you think. And it's important to do that and to expose yourself to other ideas. I know just in today, we've only scraped the surface, especially when it comes to the Postal Service, not scandal, but the Postal Service situation. So that's definitely worth looking into because it's been going on for longer than just the media has been covering it now. And it's bigger than just Trump on Twitter. These things are systematic and designed to control and to manipulate. I mean, we covered the past going all the way back to the founding of the country and how these things were designed from the get-go to corral people's votes. And most importantly, you know, make sure you do your own research and make your conclusions and keep your mind open but suspicious. What are your closing thoughts?
Well, I agree with you 100%. I think the one thing that terrifies politicians the most is an educated voter base. So the more educated you get, the better off we are as a country. It's good to have politicians scared of the voters because when they lose that fear of being able to get reelected, because you remember, that's all politicians want. Most politicians start out with all of the zeal and vigor and noble causes that most American citizens tend to feel. And they think that getting into politics is what's going to get them to that. And there have been people like Jesse Ventura, who was the former governor of Minnesota. He thought, well, you know what, if I run for office, I can change it. I can make a difference. And what he realized is that when he got into office, the system is not designed to be changed, certainly not for the disadvantage of the politicians. And he spent 2 terms as governor and hated it. He got blocked at every possible corner, and he was just beaten down and frustrated when he left office. And that's not the typical reaction. The typical reaction is a politician goes in there, they learn how to play the game, and then they slowly get corrupted over time. And then they lose that fear of the voter because at that point, the only thing that they want is to get reelected. And as long as they get reelected, they'll say and do anything. They don't care about you, the voter. They don't care about the district, the constituents, the county, the state, the country. They don't care. All they care about is getting reelected. And when there's a danger of that, because you as a voter are educated and you know what their position is and what their voting history is and what their philosophy is, then there's a chance that you're not going to vote for that. And that's what scares them. So let's scare the politicians. And I'm not just talking Trump. I'm talking every politician out there. Let's scare the hell out of them and educate ourselves and learn what the topics are and what the controversies are and what their positions are, and then make an educated decision when we go to the polls.
Absolutely. And I think that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's important. And as Americans and as humans. And I think that's one of the most important things we can do. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to be difficult, but it's something that we all have to do, especially with this upcoming election.
I agree 100%.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on today as your potentially temporary, maybe permanent host. We'll see how things go. But this has been Insights into Tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in, and have a fantastic day. Stay safe.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Your hosts are Joseph and Madison Whalen, a father and daughter team making their way through the challenges of the teenage years.
Welcome to Insights into Teens. This is episode 103, another one in our creativity, and the last one in our creativity series for now. This is about movie making. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my imaginative and astounding co-host, Madison Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, Maddie?
I'm doing all right.
So how was your week this week?
It's been interesting. School's shorter now. In fact, I'm off on Friday, and Thursday's going to be kind of interesting. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, well, nothing wrong with a short week. I'm off on Friday as well. Mommy does have a half day, so she's half off. So maybe we'll be able to do something, hang out or play games or something like that. So today we're going to be talking about movie making. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about why movie making is good for teens, some of the benefits that we get from that. Then we're going to talk about some of your movie making efforts so far. And then we'll finish up talking about what your future of movie making looks like and where you might be going with those skills. Before we get into that, I would suggest folks subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the video version of our podcast, looking us up as Insights into Things. The audio version is available as Insights into Teens. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon, pretty much any place you can get a podcast these days. We'd also invite folks to give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. Give us some suggestions for topics to talk about. You can email us directly comments at insightsintothings.com. You can get us on Twitter at insights_things. You can get us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. On Instagram, we are at Insights Into Things, or you can contact us directly through our website at www.insightsintothings.com. Ready to get started?
Yep.
All right. So this week's research was done by you. So I'm going to let you give us, and make sure you get the website right this time.
Yes.
So go ahead and give us what the research shows us this week.
So I decided to look up why movies are good for teens, and I found it on a website I accidentally mispronounced in the in our 100th podcast. YouAreMom.com is where this information comes from. Yes. Most movies have a lesson. By seeing so many different situations on screen, kids and teens develop their critical thinking skills. They also stimulate their imagination, and they can become more creative by movies. We all know that movies are one of the best forms of entertainment. However, it may surprise you to hear that there are real benefits of movies for kids and teens. New films come out every year. Their main purpose is to entertain and make viewers have a good time. However, these stories also help kids and teens learn moral lessons about the world around them. So, the first one we have is expanding their vocabulary. Children are very good at listening. They grasp everything fast. As they grow up, their vocabulary grows. Movies can help in that sense because they show situations that kids have probably never experienced. They're more likely to hear new words and learn their meanings. Usually, if kids don't understand a word, they'll ask their parents. This is a great opportunity to teach them. On the other hand, if they can read, encourage them to look up words in a dictionary. This way, not only will they learn the meaning, but also how to write it.
It also relieves stress, one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast, since teens are constantly under some form of stress. Another benefit of movies on kids and teens has to do with their emotions. Movies can help combat stress and relieve anxiety and nerves. Being in school, it's common for kids to experience these feelings. They often have various school responsibilities, tests, and exams. By getting out of this routine, kids can clear their mind and have fun. Entertainment can help them unwind.
Another one of the benefits is learn other languages. You can watch foreign films and films with other languages, which also show characters from other parts of the world. This can lead your children to become more interested in traveling and learning other languages.
Making kids and teens smarter and more creative. By seeing these experiences on the screen, kids and teens can become more reflective. The benefits of movies are obvious when parents help their children face problems. It also helps when children and teens have to draw conclusions for themselves and find solutions. In addition, this helps them develop creativity, boosts their ability to think, and stimulates their imagination. So, based on the experiences that you've had with movie making so far, do you think you've experienced any of these benefits so far?
Well, I'd probably say that movies have helped me expand my vocabulary when I was younger, and even now there are some words I learn that I kind of want to learn the meaning to, and I'd definitely say expanding my vocabulary was something that helped. Relieve stress, yes, movies were a big stress reliever for me. Honestly, watching anything really, TV shows, YouTube videos, that kind of stuff, it really does help relieve stress to just watch a cool movie or a cool scenario happen. Learn other languages. I did see other cultures and different parts of the world expressed through movies. But I didn't necessarily learn other languages, but I can definitely see how other kids would have that experience. But I just haven't had that. And of course, making kids and teens smarter and more creative, yeah, I'm pretty sure movies had pretty much helped me become much more creative now.
Yeah, and I think any outlet that allows you to express your creativity is a good thing, because any opportunity you have to exercise that creative freedom is, the brain is just like a muscle. You have to exercise it for it to get stronger and to gain more knowledge and understanding. And creativity is a huge exercise for teens. The more creative you are and the more you can express that, it touches on so many different assets that you have as a person that helps you to grow different skill sets. It helps you to grow different thought patterns. It allows you to look at problems differently. It allows you to look at problems from the perspective of your audience and the perspective of the characters that you're filming. So right now, most of the movie making that you do is an animated type of, I'd say, teen-centric movie. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, probably.
And I think that you going through some of the scenarios that you go through in the movie making that you do allows you to kind of put yourself in situations that you may not necessarily experience yourself, but you may have exposure to from books or movies or television. And in making the movies, it allows you to put yourself in that experience and figure out how you would handle something like that. Mm-hmm. So that alone, I think it's definitely a learning experience for you. But beyond that, what else are you learning aside from these developmental things? And let's look at it from a technical standpoint. You're learning how to tell stories, right? Mm-hmm. You're learning probably how to storyboard to a certain extent.
Yeah.
You're learning how to scene develop, because you're not just animating characters. You're building a scene and you're putting them in that scene. You're learning wardrobe, because your characters, you have to dress your characters, and how they dress reflects the scene that they're in and the mood that they're in.
Yep.
And you're learning storytelling in general. So there's all other kind of technical aspects on top of learning the technical requirements for this. So you're doing graphical editing. You're doing digital art. You're learning how to use the stop motion software that you're working with. Mm-hmm. You're learning how to do audio editing. So there's a lot of technical skills that go into this too. And it's interesting how, I don't know if I'm assuming you did this on purpose, the way you laid out these episodes. So we started out with art, right? So we went from art to writing to movie making. And that's kind of the natural progression, because you need all these other skills in order to do movie making, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some of the skills that we've talked about already? Explain how you apply the art and the writing to your movie making efforts.
Well, for the art aspect, like you said before with costume design and how the characters express their emotions, I use that art aspect of my creativity to make the characters look like how I want them to look. I'm able to not only know what their personalities are through the writing, but also see what they look like through the art. I'm able to give them different outfits that can express that I feel they would wear. I'm able to see firsthand what I feel as though they'd look like in real life, and I'm able to design them so that I'm able to design them for specific scenes. As for the writing, that's pretty much the entire story of it. I am able to tell the story and show the characters' personalities through the writing and their actions. I'm able to use narrative elements in order to make a steadily flowing story so that it all blends together well. I'm able to use character development to show how, and characterization to describe my characters in that kind of sense. And I'm able to express their emotions that way. I can pinpoint what different scenes would look like and different actions of the characters to better express how I want them to be perceived. So, yeah, both of them go hand in hand when I make movies.
Yeah, so your movie making is really just the culmination of all these other creative skills that we've been talking about the last few podcasts. So let's take a little break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about your movie making and how it started and how you learned how to do the things that you did. And we'll get a little bit more background on that. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Welcome back to Insights into Teens. Today we're talking movie making in our creativity series, and we're going to ask Madison a few questions about some of the movie making techniques and efforts that you've made so far. So the first question I have is, when did you first start making movies? How old were you? Do you remember your earlier efforts?
Oh, wow. I will know I was old enough when I know I was older than 9. I'm guessing at least maybe 10 or 11, or most likely 10. I do remember that when I did make movies, I mainly just recorded them on my phone, so yeah, I'd say around 10 years old.
Okay.
Is when I first made them.
What was the first thing that got you into making movies? Was it something that you had watched? Was it a story? Was it just, you felt that you had so much that you wanted to put out there that you had to make a movie about it?
So I was into LPS, and there was this one...
What's LPS?
Littlest Pet Shops. They're little toys that are pets. And there was this one channel I had seen on YouTube where it was kind of like a Dare channel but with LPS, and it was with this one character, and basically he would do dares in each of the videos, and I found it hilarious, and I kind of wanted to do something similar. Okay.
So what were some of the first videos that you did that are some of your favorite videos?
Oh goodness. So I kind of wanted to make my own versions, but I didn't actually have the LPS character that was used. So I had first done it with this one purple dog I named Douglas. And I had done some weird dares with him, but I don't actually have the videos because I was on one of my older phones before I'd gotten some of my recent ones. But when I did, but the last video I have on my phone now is when I had actually gotten the one character, and I was able to make those videos. It was I will say, when I watched the first video I ever had, I will admit it was not the best. But it also wasn't the worst. It actually had some decent elements about it. There was one moment that was actually pretty nice and heartfelt and actually showed some really good storytelling. And there was also one legitimate moment where I just laughed out loud because the one scene was just so hilarious. Of course, there were also some annoying characters in there that I could have done without. But overall, although it was a cringy video to get through, I have a lot of nostalgia for it, and I can't help but say that it wasn't all bad.
Okay. So walk us through how you would make those early videos. Was it something where you were doing stop motion animation frame by frame? Were you just sort of manipulating the characters and doing voiceovers? How sophisticated were the techniques at the time?
At the time, not very sophisticated, I'll be honest. I had props and other characters I'd use in the videos, but overall I'd mainly just film them with my phone on my bed, move the characters with my hand, and try to imitate sounds and voices and stuff like that without really good audio, which is why I have to kind of turn up the volume because my voice was so quiet back then.
Okay. So the videos that you were making at this early stage, what kind of videos were they? Were they comedies? Were they, because I know you were into the unboxing stuff for a while there. Were these scripted things, or was this really just you taking video of you playing with the various toys?
Well, yeah, the very early stuff I tried mainly was comedy. When I got into the unboxing stuff, it was just unboxing. I just unboxed stuff and showed my reaction. That was pretty much it. There were other times where I didn't actually have, episodes in the series, and it was just, showing off, just using the toys. I never actually scripted anything. I think, there was probably only one time where I might have had a script, and even then it's kind of stretching it, because I really never scripted my stuff, and I kind of just had my natural reaction with no script whatsoever.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. And at that age, you're 10, 11 years old. I wasn't expecting it to be all that sophisticated. You were kind of really just learning how to express your creativity in movies. But the movies that you liked to make back then, did they reflect what you were watching more than sort of everyday life?
Like I said before, the very first videos I made were inspired by this one YouTube channel, so yeah, I guess it would have something to do with that. Unboxings were obviously unboxing videos. Others I kind of made up out of the blue, but yeah, I would say that back then, a lot of that kind of still reflected, my writing and my art. That kind of still reflected what I saw. So yeah, I'd say so.
All right. Well, let's talk about how you're making your movies now. What kind of movies are you doing at this point in time? I'm assuming you've stepped up the storytelling and the technical abilities quite a bit since then. Could you kind of describe the type of movies that you're making now?
Sure. So I'm no longer doing live action stuff. I realized I don't actually have, we did get some stuff so that I could use it for live action, but I kind of stopped with that. I did decide that I was going to make a movie, and I had started using an app I've mentioned before, Gacha Life and Gacha Club now. I've been using those to make the movies so far, and this time I'm actually trying to use a script. I've been writing scripts for different episodes. I have different series planned. And I have all the characters laid out, and I know what I want to do with them. I'm trying to plan it a bit more, and I definitely say I'm a lot more sophisticated than back then.
Okay, so when you go about writing a script at this point in time, are you writing it just for the dialogue, or are you writing it like a screenplay where you're doing scene descriptions and art direction and stuff like that? Is that all included in here so that you know what to do when you get to the point that you're going to film something?
Well, I do have some liberties. I do have different stage directions, and I do sometimes describe the scene. Other times I really don't, and like when I go back and take the screenshots for it, I already know what I can kind of plan it out myself. The script is kind of like a base outline, if you will.
Okay. How about overall story planning? Do you storyboard your scenes out? Do you outline the screenplay? What do you do to plan from, shot one to the last shot in the series there to know what you want to do when you want to do it and so forth?
Well, I split it up into different scenes. I have the different scenes marked on my script, and I know that, and to pace myself, I edit one part of one scene, and then once I'm done taking the photos for the next one, then I work on that, and then eventually by the end I'm gonna put it all together.
So is what you're doing now more stop action? Are you doing hand animation? Is the software itself doing any kind of tweening or any kind of auto animation for you? Or are you manually manipulating each of these and taking a shot and then streaming these shots together?
I have to take screenshots of the characters because I don't, and like sometimes I do work with animation by using different poses and kind of putting the pictures together to make it look like stop motion. So sometimes I do that kind of animation. But most of the time, a lot of it's just I take a few screenshots, then I go into my software and I make them shorter or longer depending on how long a scene I want it to be.
So when you go about creating your scenes now, are you building the scene elements through like a graphic editor, or are you building them inside the Gasha app itself along with the characters, or are the characters hand drawn by you?
I'm building the scenes specifically in Gasha, but there are some times where I kind of need to draw something, so then I go into where I do my digital art, and then I draw out that scene, take a screenshot of it, and add it into the editing software so that I can add that. But most of the time, it's really just I do everything through Gasha, take the photos, and transport them over to the software editor. But there are some times, especially with animation, that I have to kind of put a green screen back on the characters and have them walk across the screen, which I can't exactly do in Gasha very well. So yeah, there are some things that I do in Gasha and some things I do outside of it.
Okay. What about reusing elements? Do you build a character's bedroom, for instance, and then can you reuse that bedroom, or do you have to rebuild it every time in the software in order to create a scene from that?
Well, the software has various backgrounds that you're able to use, and a lot of times I kind of reuse some of the backgrounds, but I do try to change them up a bit. I have the ability to add objects and pets and stuff like that, so I can change the bedrooms so I can change the rooms in order to make it look different. So yeah, and sometimes sometimes I do is a background where I don't actually have it in the game, but I can probably look up the background on Google, take a screenshot of that, and use that while using green screen for the characters.
So when you build these scenes and you animate them, so you're building a slide-by-slide representation of the scene itself. You then export these, and then you bring them into what software at that point in time to actually make the movie?
The software I use is called KineMaster. I'm pretty sure a lot of people who are doing this kind of thing use it. And it's a decent editing software. And I'm able to do a lot of stuff with it. So I transport all my images through KineMaster right now, and I am debating on whether I want to keep going with it or maybe do something different.
And typically, how long are the movies that you're making right now?
They're not really that long. Most of the scenes only last about 1 or 2 minutes tops, because I have to shorten all the images down. And I have added some of them together, and they only really last about maybe half an hour. So I'm guessing I call them mini movies because they're mini movies, basically. So they're not typically that long.
So for a half hour worth of movie, how long does it typically take you in creation time to make a half hour long movie?
I can't exactly say because I'm still not there yet. It's taken a lot of months only to get like maybe 16 minutes of film. Honestly, the one scene I'm still working on includes a lot of editing, something I'm not really too used to. And it's honestly, I've been procrastinating on it for a little while now. It was pretty easy the first time. But now I have to get into scenes where there's going to be a lot more editing. So, yeah, it takes a really long time for me to just make a 30-minute film.
So what are some of the challenges, obviously editing being one of them, but what are some of the challenges that you run into in making the kinds of movies that you make?
A lot of it is probably motivation. Because sometimes I need the motivation to work on it, and a lot of times, I don't have that motivation. I've maybe had a long day, or I just feel as though I'm not going to be able to move on with the scene, and that's actually happened a couple times throughout this, and it's been one of the biggest challenges. Like, sometimes I feel as though, sometimes I feel as though I don't exactly know how to make the scene, and other times it's just, I don't really feel like it. Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of like writer's block, if you will, with it. I still want to try and gain a bit more motivation. I've normally always picked myself up. Unfortunately, I am still in one of those states, but I am trying to do better.
Yeah, and I can sort of sympathize with that because, shooting the podcast, we do it usually at least 2 a week. There's a good deal of post-production that goes into it. Mostly the audio side, the video side is pretty much taken for stock. But the advantage that I have in doing the podcast is that most of what we do that would be post-processing is done in line. We do our intros, our commercials, our transitions, all that stuff is done in line and doesn't require editing. The editing itself is really me going back in after the fact and cleaning up the audio, getting rid of background noise and sort of polishing it up and running it through a post-processor before I re-render the entire video for production release. But you figure we do roughly an hour or so, 45 minutes to an hour, and it probably takes me at least an hour in post-production to clean up everyone. So it's almost a 1-to-1 ratio, but that's the technology doing most of it for me. Doing a stop-motion animation is agonizingly long.
Yeah, my biggest problem, the biggest thing I've learned from this is just making a character run takes so many screenshots. It's insane.
Yeah, if you do it at standard film rate, which is 24 frames per second, you need to create 24 images for every second of film that you want to put out there to be viewed. And you need to make sure that everything is the same. You need to make sure that your animation is fluid and in line. It can't be jerky. It can't be jumpy. If you're running at a steady pace, you have to make sure that the figure that's doing the running is moving exactly at the same distance. You need to make sure that whatever's going on in the background is animating correctly. It's a lot of work to do animation.
Yeah. And, like, this isn't even drawing it. Imagine having to draw every single scene and having to draw 24 scenes per second of film.
Well, and that's why if you look at the big animation firms like, Disney, Disney has their master artists. They do the keyframes, and then they have, junior artists come in who are the tweeners, and they do everything in between the keyframes. So you may be an artist that does a keyframe every 4 frames, and then somebody else comes in and draws the 3 frames in between. And then you don't even color it. Then it goes off to someone else, and they color it. And then somebody else will do the voiceover recording, and then that has to be dubbed in. And, because we haven't even delved into doing audio with yours yet. You're using dialogue boxes right now for your animation, right? So there's a lot more that would go into a post-production to have a finalized film there. So it's a lot, it's a big undertaking, and it's a big production. And, I think you're progressing through that, and the experience that you have at this point, I think, is giving you that appreciation when you do watch films. So we're going to take another quick break. We're going to come back, and we're going to talk about what the future of movie making might be for you. We'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. This is episode 103. We're talking movie making. So the future of movie making. So right now you're using a couple of applications that are exclusively on your iPad. Is that correct?
Yep.
And how capable are they moving forward?
I'd say they're pretty fine. I'm still debating, I'm deciding whether I should continue moving on with KineMaster, the main editing software for my movies, and if I should be doing something else. But right now it's been going alright. And that's basically the main thing I've been using, so I guess we'll see how it goes.
So, the reason I ask is there's a number of more powerful movie making applications out there. If you move it up to, putting it on your laptop or running it on a desktop PC, I think you'll find that the options that you have are significantly more than what you get on just the tablet itself, just from the processing power itself. But I did want to ask, how have the tools that you use to make movies changed since you first started making movies? Have they gotten easier, more powerful, more options? What would you say are the major changes?
Well, like I said, when I first started making movies, I really just recorded them on my camera, on my phone. So after that, when I finally got into more advanced movie making, I started using more movie making well, there was when my stop motion period where you had gotten me a stop motion app that I was able to fully use stop motion instead of just filming live. And that kind of started my stop motion phase. After that phase, I went into the movie making phase I have now. Now that I'm using KineMaster, I have a lot more options for film. It's a lot more sophisticated than when I first started out, and it's definitely more powerful than when I first started out, so
how has your movie making style changed since your early days? Have you become more organized? Has it just been an increase in sophistication as the tools improved? What are some of the major changes, major differences from your early movie making to what you do now?
Well, with the early movie making, I really wasn't so concerned about the story. It was mainly just trying to make something comical and just a comical little series, and a lot of it was centered around my LPS toys. Then I went into unboxing because it was what I saw and kind of thought it was cool. And then when I went in my stop motion phase, I still used the LPS, but tried to do it in a more sophisticated manner. And that's kind of when I did storytelling, but I still didn't have a script, and it kind of just came to me out of the blue. And now I write down a full-on script. I make the make the characters in Gacha Club, put the scenes together, take screenshots of the scenes, put them together, edit them, and make a movie.
Okay. So moving forward, assuming we eventually someday in the not too distant future move past the whole pandemic and quarantine and all that stuff, what do you think you want to do? Would you be interested in trying different styles of movie making? Like, would you want to do live action and get your friends involved in doing live action scenes and stuff like that? Do you want to move into different genres and kind of, what's the next step for you? What's that next progression in movie making for you?
Well, for me, if I am able to again, I do kind of want to, turn my characters into slightly more live action versions. Maybe not like a real movie with special effects, costumes, and stuff like that, but maybe just play out the scenes with some of my friends, and maybe even with you guys to see how that works.
Well, that sounds kind of cool. I'd be interested in doing that. So have you looked, or do you continue to look at different movie making technologies, cameras, software, any editing techniques, anything like that? Do you keep up on that sort of thing to find out what the next best thing is to help you make your movies?
Well, I haven't really been doing too much research on it, but I do feel as though I want to learn a bit more about it, especially coming from you. You do a lot of editing now, especially with the podcast, and you have a tendency of making movies, so I might want to learn a bit more from you, see how I can translate what I know into what you know. So, yeah, I might try different editing software techniques and learn from you.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be happy to teach you. What do you enjoy about making movie making? I'm assuming, it's not a lucrative venture for you. You're not making it and selling the rights or anything like that. So you're not doing it for money. So it has to be for the enjoyment or the joy and the learning experience. What do you get out of making movies?
Oh, a lot of it. Some of it is the satisfaction of knowing that figuring out that I really created something that I felt would change people's lives, or something like that. I really just enjoy making stories, and turning them into a completely different medium, along with art, is really nice for me, and gives me a bunch of satisfaction for that. But it's also the fact that that if I ever do show it to a true audience, I kind of want my characters to be relatable and kind of go through the scenarios that I went through as I'm growing up. Which is why I like to put characters as teens, because I have to be honest, a lot of times I feel like teens and kids aren't entirely expressed super well in the media. So I kind of want to, as a fellow teen, and especially as a preteen when I kind of want to show that to people. Like, as a preteen, I had no ideas what some of the struggles would be, like I mentioned earlier before, the struggles of having to find clothes between the grown-up section and the kids section. So I kind of want to show those struggles in relatable characters throughout a story.
So you've identified an underrepresentative section of the population in movies. Do you think that also is a representation of an audience that would be interested in seeing something like that? Like, would you want to watch films about those types of things if they were available?
More than likely. I want to kind of have a mix of fantasy, but also reality. I'm a big fantasy fan, and I like sci-fi stuff, and I'm sure plenty of other teens like me also do. And I actually wouldn't mind having characters who I can relate to more. Like, in a lot of films, it's usually much older characters or older teens that I can't exactly identify with because I'm not that old. And the teens that are expressed are, like, shown to be typical stereotypes, like the one who likes video games, the one who's super edgy and totally rebels, and the hip, cool one. Honestly, I just want a kid to be represented normally. I don't want people to think that all teens hate school. I don't mind school at all. And I want the proper struggles of teens to be represented well as relatable moments that I've experienced to be shown. And of course, I want more preteens to be shown because I really didn't see much of that.
It's a very good point. You know, there's a lot of story out there that's that's real. You know, it's reality, and that's very rarely reflected in the media. That's largely why we do this podcast. You know, I could sit here and I could spout off all the research that I find online and do it all by myself. But without having you here and without having a teenage perspective here to actually talk about these things, it's meaningless. So by having a teen make movies about teens for teens, I think is fairly significant. And I think there's an audience out there that can relate to it, that probably wants to see that just like you do. So inevitably, these types of discussions when we talk about these things has to talk about the future and about careers. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? I've asked you this with the last 2 podcasts that we've done. So have you ever thought about making a career out of movie making? And if so, what would be your ideal role? Do you want to write, direct, act, film? Do you want to be a director of photography? Do you want to be a set designer? What would if you could pick any role in the movie making business, what would you pick?
More than likely writing. I don't feel as though acting would really work for me. Set design, could be cool, but I don't feel is what I'd want to do. I definitely think the writing portion would probably be the part I'd want to work on, because I want to make quality writing. I want to make stories that can relate to audiences that aren't shown very well in the media, so that I can use that storytelling in order to make movies that teens like me could relate to.
Okay, I could definitely see that. And the last question that I had before we get your closing thoughts and shout outs is, do you think personally, the experience that you had, if someone else your age could go through it, do you think that they would benefit from the experience other than just the sheer enjoyment? Is there a quantitative benefit to movie making for teens?
Yes, there is. It has a lot to do with the technical aspect, but also, and of course the enjoyment, but teens could get a lot more from movie making. They can find out passions they might have never really experienced before. They can come up with situations they've never experienced before, but find a way to make it relatable to them. They can find ways of expressing themselves more and find ways to identify themselves. So there's a lot more benefits that are just skim the surface and people don't normally look deeper into.
That's a very good answer. Very well thought out, well-rounded answer. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and get your closing thoughts and shout-outs if you have them. Go for your closing remarks.
Okay, so to any teen out there who is hoping or deciding that, hey, I want to make some type of movie, go for it. You don't have to have an amazing software. You don't have to have a script for it. It doesn't even have to be that much planned. If you just want to do it how I started out, just make a video on your own, then do it. You don't have to get too sophisticated if you don't want to, but if you do have that passion for it, go for it. You can get plenty of benefits with even the least sophisticated and the most sophisticated way of making movies.
Okay, very good. I think that's great advice for everybody out there. Get out there and make movies. Have fun. So while movie making is a culmination of the last two creative podcasts that we did, we do have another podcast that's going to be coming up that's going to deal kind of with all of these things together. So we have a D&D group that all the hosts of the show do right now. And we'll be starting hopefully this weekend, a new campaign that I'll be DMing. And what it really allows us to do is exercise our writing ability for character backstories and, for the DM side, putting the campaign together. It allows us to do artwork because you did a poster for us which we'll show on the podcast. And it allows us to do directing because we're playing characters in this. And we kind of have to make our characters be true to what the character is. And then on top of that, the next skill that we exercise is our acting skills. I don't know how deep into it you want to get, but you can always do an accent or, slip into that character and play that character as true to their backstory as possible. So that'll be coming up. I don't know if it'll be next week. I think we're going to wait until at least we get one session in the new campaign under our belt before we do that one. But that's something to look forward to. Yeah. But anyway, before we go, I do want to once again suggest folks subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to us. Our video versions of our podcast, all of the network podcasts are available, listed as Insights into Things. Our audio podcasts for this specific show will be listed for Insights into Teens. You can get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and any place else you can get podcasts. We would also love to get your feedback. We're running out of ideas for shows at this point, so we need ideas. So feedback and tell us what you want us to talk about and explore. You can email those over to us at comments@insightsintothings.com. We are on Twitter at insights_things. You can get high-res versions of all of our shows, videos of our shows at YouTube on youtube.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 6 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. We also, if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you do get a free Twitch Prime subscription monthly. We'd love it if you threw that our way. It helps us out. You can get audio versions of this podcast at podcast.insightsintoteens.com. You can give us feedback on our Facebook page at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. On Instagram, we are at Insights Into Things, or you can get all those links on our main website, as well as video, audio, and everything else at www.insightsintothings.com. And you...
And don't forget to check out our other two podcasts, Insights into Entertainment, hosted by you and Mommy, and It's Into Tomorrow, our monthly podcast, hosted by you and my brother Sam.
That's it. Another one in the books.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Your hosts, Joseph and Michelle Whalen, a husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics, are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom.
Welcome to Insights into Entertainment. This is episode 103, Something About Obi-Wan. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my comforting and caring co-host, Michelle Whalen.
Aww.
And why are you comforting and caring, dear?
I don't know. Why?
Because
of last Friday.
Because last Friday, we had an incident.
Yep, we did.
Had to go to the hospital for a little medical issue I had, and you were my pillar of support there. You
I was your comfort animal or your support.
You were my support animal. Yes, you were. So you helped me keep things together.
Well, I'm glad.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Not talking about that today, though. We're putting that in the past because everything's going better now. Mm-hmm. So in today's episode, we're going to talk in Disney Detective about going contactless at Walt Disney World with your iPhone. The Florida Governor DeSantis also is trying to go with no vaccine passports for the whole state, including the theme parks. Then in our Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy, will Liam Neeson wind up reprising his role as Qui-Gon or not in Obi-Wan, the series? And we also have cast announcements and dates for the new series, which starts filming, I think, April, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yep.
Then in our entertainment news, we will talk about What We Do in the Shadows getting another spin-off. They're going to be haunting CW and HBO Max this time. And then we'll talk about a new National Treasure show coming to Disney Plus. And obviously, we'll finish up with our insightful picks, and we have a couple of afterthoughts.
Yep.
So stick around at the end of the show for a couple of announcements that might signal a slight return to what we used to think of as normal life.
Mm-hmm.
Before we do that, though, I would invite folks to subscribe to the podcast. You can get video versions of the podcast listed as Insights into Things. You can get audio versions listed as Insights in Entertainment. You can find us on Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Pandora, any place you can get a podcast now. I would also invite folks to reach out to us, give us your feedback, tell us what you want us to talk about, what you don't want us to talk about. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. On Twitter, we are at insights_things. On Facebook, you can get us at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. On Instagram, we are at Insights Into Things, or you can get links to all those on our website at www.insightsintothings.com. Shall we get into it?
Sure.
All right. Go for Disney Detective.
So it seems Disney Magic mobile options are now launching on Apple devices, and how to get started for a contactless Walt Disney World Park entry. Say that 5 times fast. So beginning today, guests at Walt Disney World will be able to enjoy a convenient and contactless new option for entering the park and doing other things around the park as well. It'll be available on iPhone and Apple Watch, but it will be coming to other smart devices later on. Disney Magic Mobile Service is a fun, easy-to-use way for guests to experience the most magical place on Earth. The service is offered in addition to other options such as the Magic Bands, which are the colorful all-in-one bracelet, which will continue to be available and also be introduced in even more colors, designs, and limited edition fan favorites in the future. So the article talks about how you can even create a customized digital pass. So guests can create a Disney Magic mobile pass through the My Disney Experience app and add it to your wallet app on your iPhone or digital wallet on other smart devices. And then you can customize your pass by choosing several different Disney-themed designs that animate upon use. There's even special designs for annual pass holders and DVC members. And you can use it on multiple devices or on a single device. So you could share it with, options for family members to use. So basically what you would do is to enter the park, you would simply hold your iPhone or Apple Watch or other smart device near the access point when entering the park, or using other available features like you would do with your Magic Band. So it basically would replace your Magic Band if you didn't already have one or didn't want to purchase a Magic Band, because as we had talked about before, the Magic Bands are no longer given free if you're a resort guest. You either have to use one that you've already used before or purchase a new one. So here's another option for guests, to use. Obviously, it would link up with your park pass, and also they're going to have another enhancement of it will also sync up with your Disney Photo Pass as well. So all of your photos, once they've been taken, would download right to your phone. So you wouldn't have to go in and manually update them. So they're, making all these little, advances to make it a much more seamless experience, it seems.
All right, so I got a whole bunch of questions here. Okay,
I don't know if I'm going to have the answers. I haven't tried using it yet.
So, first question I have is it just to get in the parks, or does it work like your Magic Band to get into your room as well?
I believe it's going to be anything that you would normally use your Magic Band for. So, park entrance, resort room entrance, payment for
things.
What?
And so you mentioned that it works with PhotoPass, can I use it to scan my PhotoPass in like I can with the Magic Band as well?
Yes.
So when you go to the
with your
photographer, you have to scan your thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it works for that as well. Okay.
Yes.
So this is basically a universal replacement for Magic Bands at this point.
Right. Or if you don't have an iPhone or don't want to use your smartphone, you can get a regular room key, and those room keys could be used for park entrance, the room, and for your charge as well. So, because I'm sure there's going to be people, because I know when Disney started going towards the My Disney Experience app and everything, people were complaining because it was draining their battery.
Right.
And a lot of people, so when people had to pull up what their Fast Pass time was or something with that, a lot of people were complaining about the battery, on their phone going.
So what about, I just lost my train of thought now. That's a train that's easily derailed these days.
I was going to say that, but, I didn't.
I can't think of what I was going to ask. Next question I have was, it's not available for Android devices yet. Do they have a time frame yet?
They don't list anything as of yet, but at least they're going to be supporting it at some point, because you can use the My Disney Experience app on all platforms.
Okay.
So
I remember what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Is it restricted in any way to people that are resort guests, or can anybody take advantage of this?
It doesn't say that it's for one or the other.
Okay.
Because obviously we know resort guests, they were pushing everybody to have Magic Bands because it was your room key, it was your charge and everything else. But as a park guest staying someplace else, you could get a Magic Band. You weren't required to do it. So, yes, you could.
Now, I'm going to get technical here. I'm assuming they haven't published any information on what average battery usage is using this app throughout the day at this point.
Yeah, nothing
yet. Because that would be an area of concern.
Right. Because that's always something, and you see everybody with their, little battery backups to charge their phone, throughout the day.
And Disney has been putting in charging stations around the park as well. So.
Right.
And I think the last question I had was lost again. Wow.
Okay.
I'm having one of those days today. Does this play in any way into the facial recognition beta testing that they were doing in last week's
It doesn't
story?
even talk about this, because this article actually came from DisneyParks.com. So this was an official Disney, where the article that we talked about
was there.
Somebody that just happened to be there. So
okay. Fair point. Fair point. What else do we have in Disney Detective today?
So in some other Florida news, staying on the southern East Coast, it seems that the Florida governor moves to prevent the use of vaccine passports in the state of Florida, including at theme parks. So citing privacy concerns, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis had said earlier this week that he intends to block the use of COVID-19 vaccine passports in the state of Florida. In comments, he said, "It is completely unacceptable for either the government or the private sector to impose upon you the requirement that you show proof of vaccine to just simply be able to participate in normal society." He went on to specifically mention theme parks, saying, "You want to go to a movie theater? You should have to show that? No. You want to go to a game or a theme park? No. So we're not supportive of that." He says that he plans to use executive actions to ban their use in Florida. Vaccine passports are obviously gaining widespread attention worldwide, as they are seen as a way to enable safer levels of transportation and attendance at events. Disney has yet to make any official comment on whether it plans to attempt to use vaccine passports as a part of its future policies at Walt Disney World. Meanwhile, at the White House, senior advisor for COVID-19 response had said the government here is not viewing its role as the place to create a passport, nor a place to hold the data of citizens. We view this as something that the private sector is doing and will do.
I think it's a little premature at this point since a vaccine passport doesn't even exist.
Right.
So to ban something that doesn't exist is kind of silly.
It's kind of silly.
And when it does exist, you have no idea what's going to be on there. Like, for instance, we both have our shots at this point in time. We have a card from the CDC, and that card has information on there about the batch ID, the location, all that stuff. So there is personally identifiable information associated
there's
with
something out there.
So that wouldn't be a very good passport. But a passport that you take that card and get a button, for instance. You know, your passport could be as simple as a button like you had purchased for us that says, I'm vaccinated.
Right.
Would that offend you to have to wear something like that to get into the theme park?
No. It wouldn't offend me at all.
Yeah.
You know, and this is something that we're starting to see now as travel and other things are starting to reopen. Cruise lines as a we'll go with that. I have a friend of mine who happens to be a travel agent and an avid traveler and has not done anything. And she has now booked a cruise. And I don't remember which company it was.
Wouldn't be booking a cruise at this point.
But it happens to be a cruise where you have to show proof that you've been vaccinated to go on the cruise. Masks are required in any public area. If you're outside, they, will make sure that chairs are spread out. In the dining areas, things will still be spread out. And it lists all the places that you are required to wear a mask and where it's optional.
See, that's sort of the problem that I have here is that the theme parks, all right, let's just stick to the theme parks for a minute. The theme parks are a private property. They're not owned by the government.
Right, absolutely.
The government can't tell you how to behave on it. Disney has the ability to say what you can and can't do, how you must dress.
Absolutely.
There are very strict guidelines on what you can wear going into the theme parks.
Absolutely.
So in order to use their facilities and enter their park, Disney's well within its rights to say you have to be vaccinated to come in here.
And
you have to show proof of it.
Right. And if Disney decided tomorrow to do that, I would be okay with that.
And I would too. And the government, the governor of Florida would have absolutely no say over that.
Right. Exactly. Because again, it's the private sector. It's just like how stores have, even though certain states now have said you don't need to wear a mask, it's not mandatory anymore. But stores that are within
just like
those
a store
states,
can require that you wear shoes and a shirt to come into it.
And there are corporate stores that have said no matter what state it's in, you still need to wear a mask. We don't want to,
This whole thing strikes me as turning the whole COVID thing into another political
absolutely
pivot point here that someone's going to try and prove their point that they're not like I have a right to not be vaccinated. Like it's such an idiotic concept.
And that's the thing is that Krispy Kreme, the donuts. I don't think we actually have one nearby, or maybe we do. They
probably better if we didn't.
Probably better. They actually had a thing that once you've gotten your shot, bring in your card and we'll give you a free donut.
Yeah.
Okay. So there also happened to be in our local area a gym who back in last year got into trouble because when our state has shut down, he kept open and all these different citations or whatever. So now Krispy Kreme came out and said, hey, get a vaccine, get a free donut. He offered, don't get a vaccine and we'll give you a free membership to the gym and you don't have to wear a mask.
Right. Which is just childish at this point.
Right.
Just
exactly.
childish.
That's
Like at that point, you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution.
Exactly. So here to say we're not going to require, like you said, it's up to each individual
Right. It's up to the
company to decide what they want to do.
To me, it's idiotic to ban something that doesn't even exist yet.
Right.
That is, you're just trying to win political points, for a certain segment of the population.
Right.
And it's like, let's not make this public. All right. Right. Over 500,000 people in the United States have died from this already. Let's try to take it a little more seriously. Mm-hmm. All right. Rant over, and I wasn't ranting about Disney. See? Look at that. Wasn't ranting about Disney that time.
That's impressive.
All right. Let's take a break, and we'll come back with our Tales from the Edge of the Other Side of the Galaxy thing.
Sure.
For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. Go for Tales from the Other Edge of the Thing.
From a long time ago.
Far away. All that stuff.
So it seems that Liam Neeson says that he would be up for returning to the franchise in Obi-Wan Kenobi's Disney Plus series. So it seems that he has expressed an interest in returning as Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn. And obviously we haven't seen him in the Star Wars franchise since episode 1 that came out in 1999.
You've heard him though.
Wow, that is true. You did hear him. So it seems that he's, again, interested if they wanted him to appear. Obviously, we know that Obi-Wan will be coming out. Obi-Wan is obviously played by Ewan McGregor. He's reprising the role in the new series along with Anakin Skywalker, being played by Hayden Christensen as well. When asked about the calls from Star Wars fans to bring back the character of Qui-Gon, he had said, "I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard that at all." So after being assured that yes, there was a demand from fans for him to return, he'd said, "Sure, I'll be up for that." Obviously, if you've seen the movie, you know that his character was killed at the end of Phantom Menace. But he obviously came back as a Force ghost, which obviously left the door open for the character to come back in some sort of form. In that same interview, the actor expressed doubt about the future of the Star Wars franchise, saying, "I'm sort of wondering, is Star Wars starting to fade away from the cinema landscape? Probably not."
I know that just makes me think he actually saw the sequel trilogies.
Well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe he saw. So obviously we have Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out, and obviously other Disney Star Wars projects, the 3rd season of The Mandalorian, the Boba Fett spinoff, and obviously, other things that we know, The Bad Batch. I think there was a trailer or something
today,
for that too. So obviously Star Wars isn't going away. Maybe it's not going to be as cinematic as, maybe that was kind of where he was going with it. But,
talking specifically to him reprising his role, it's worth noting that Darth Maul got cut in half and they brought him back too.
True.
So there's
True.
nothing to say that we can't bring him back.
It's kind of like with soap operas. Just because they died doesn't mean
Exactly.
they're not
Exactly.
dead forever.
Qui-Gon learned the secret of turning into a Force ghost and has passed that along. So I think that was significant, but I could totally see Obi-Wan out in the middle of the desert living by himself there, having hallucinations at least.
Right.
You know,
I can see
he might
that.
not actually be there,
Right.
but he might think he's there. I mean,
True.
You know, Obi-Wan had Force ghost appearances after he died too.
Right. True.
So there's no reason for that.
Yeah. So.
But to his point about, you know, Star Wars, I think Disney learned a major lesson trying to flood the market with Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Like they tried to recreate, we've talked about this in the past.
Yeah,
They tried to recreate that Marvel Cinematic Universe with a movie coming out every few months and found that you can't do that with Star Wars. It doesn't work. Well,
Right.
when you make terrible movies, it doesn't work. If you
They
make
haven't-
good movies, if you
they
made
haven't-
Rogue One level movies every time, it would
They
have
haven't
worked.
found their niche yet, because with Marvel, they're doing different characters in
Right,
so many of the
and,
things.
And, you know, in all fairness, Marvel had a couple stinkers in there too.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, Iron Man 2 was terrible, and all the Hulk movies were horrible, and pretty much all the Thor movies were horrible. It was the movies where they were all together that was really good.
All the assembled movies.
Right. Once they've been assembled, it's okay. Some assembly required.
You need to go to IKEA and get your Allen wrench.
But yeah, I think he makes a point that Star Wars has kind of found its niche in television,
Yeah.
in serial form at this point
Yeah.
in time. And it's not the first time. I mean,
Right.
you know, you had your Clone Wars, you had your Rebels, you had what was that other one that nobody liked? Resistance or whatever it was.
Right.
You know, they've had their run in animation, and I think they surprised a lot of people with their live action.
Right.
And it's really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as a Star Wars fan myself, I'm perfectly happy getting my snippets of the Star Wars universe that way, and then doing a Star Wars movie, as long as it's not directed by Rian Johnson.
That's your only prerequisite.
I'll be perfectly honest. I'm very excited to see what Taika Waititi comes out with for
gosh.
his movie. That's going to be awesome.
That has to be awesome because
he's awesome.
he's awesome.
Speaking of awesome, we have more Obi-Wan news to talk about.
Yeah, so it seems that they have now unveiled the cast for Obi-Wan Kenobi. So Disney Plus revealed the cast for the upcoming special event series that is set 10 years after the events of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. So joining Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen in the series are Moses Ingram, Joel Edgerton, Bonnie Plies, Kumala. I'm gonna totally
Guess we should have rehearsed this.
probably Rupert Friend, O'Shea Jackson Jr. Unfortunately, none of these names sound familiar, but maybe it's one of those things. If I saw them, I would know who they are. But no details on their actual characters had been given yet. Production, as you had mentioned, will begin in April. The return of Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader in the new series was actually announced back in November, so we've known about that for a while. Obi-Wan Kenobi will be directed by Deborah Chow, whose credits include 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, has not yet actually given a premiere date. Obviously, we know things had gotten pushed back because of COVID, because I think they were originally supposed to be coming out with it in 2021, I think, when they had first announced it. Obviously, if they're not even starting to film, we're probably looking at maybe a January 2022, maybe?
Possibly.
So, we'll see.
Depends on how quickly they rush it and any production issues they run into.
Right, and Disney, what's nice with Disney is they don't like to have things all come out at the same time. They kind of like to
that's how you milk your
spread it.
subscriptions, especially when you're increasing your rates on your subscriptions.
Absolutely. So obviously we know
Which
we'll
I noticed
have
we cleverly didn't cover increase in the Disney Plus subscriptions.
Because we pay for it annually, so
Yeah.
so I didn't notice. We'll notice next whatever when the bill comes.
Well, since we're not going to the parks and getting an increase in our park
True.
tickets, we got to give it to Disney somehow.
Right, and I get Disney dollars, so technically I'm not paying for it.
That's really all that matters, right?
Some respect, I guess. Yeah, so we'll obviously, as they start filming, we'll obviously probably hear more in terms of dates as things come.
Right. And I'm looking forward to it. I just like you, I'm not familiar with a lot of the cast that they announced, but that actually kind of interests me.
Yes.
Because one of the things that Star Wars really did well in its very early inception
Right.
was bringing the talents of people out that were largely unfamiliar to audiences.
Yeah.
They did that again with, to a certain extent, they did it with Solo. They did it with Rogue One. To a certain extent, they did it with Mandalorian. So it's one of those things where they kind of have
that's kind of their thing.
Yeah, that's their thing, and they've done a very good job. I'd much rather see that. I also did see Russell Crowe signed on. I have to look up the article, but I just saw Russell Crowe signed on to one of the shows that we like. So,
oh, okay.
They do. I'd rather see that than to see a whole bunch of people that are big name stars who are fighting for attention and competing, because you don't. A lot of times you don't get the kind of selfless dynamic that you would expect to see from the kind of show that we look for.
Right, right.
So anyway, very much looking forward to that. And that was all we had for our Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy. That's Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm fried today. It's a good thing it's a long weekend.
For some.
Don't be jealous.
I'm not. You still owe me a vacation day.
I do. I know. I stole yours last week. Yeah. I'll do your job tomorrow for you. How's that?
Okay.
You might not have a job on Monday if I do, though.
Okay.
That's it for Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy. We'll be right back with our entertainment news.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Dum 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 dum.
Go for entertainment news.
So it seems What We Do in the Shadows is getting a spin-off that will land on the CW and HBO Max. So the broadcast network will get its first airings of Wellington Paranormal from Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement. So the world of What We Do in the Shadows is now expanding. So the CW and HBO Max have jointly acquired Wellington Paranormal, a spin-off of the 2014 vampire mockumentary, which also spawned the FX series What We Do in the Shadows. The show is the first joint acquisition by the two outlets. HBO Max is the parent company of Warner Media, which jointly owns the CW with Viacom CBS. So under the agreement, The CW will get the first airings of the show, which is set to be part of its summer schedule. A premiere date has yet to be determined. And then HBO Max will stream the episodes a day after the broadcast debut, as will the broadcaster's ad-supported streaming platforms. So HBO Max has a full season of streaming rights of some other CW original series, including Batwoman, Nancy Drew, Walker, Superman and Lois, Kung Fu and the Republic of Sarah, which they'll be airing as well after it airs on the CW. Wellington Paranormal stars two of the stars who were part of the original film, and they'll be reprising their roles. They actually played two hardworking members of the Wellington, New Zealand Paranormal Unit. Under the leadership of the sergeant, the unit investigates the surprisingly regular supernatural occurrences in the city capital. They had Clement and Watiti had created the series with executive producer Paul Yates. The New Zealand Documentary Board produces the series, actually. So it's funny. I don't remember who these two characters were because it's been so long since we saw the original movie, but they were kind of like...
I think we're very show-centric now, that the movie's
right, that the movie, we kind of have to like go back and watch. So I think it was one of those things where these were kind of like two police officers that were kind of walking around and there was something going on. They were like, oh yeah, that happens all the time, or you know, so it'll probably be a good thing maybe for us to go back and watch the original movie to kind of refresh. Oh, absolutely, to kind of refresh ourselves. So, you know, here's another spin on it, and obviously this will take place because the television series takes place in New York,
right?
And so this part will actually take place in New Zealand, more than likely. So should be interesting.
And again, it's another project from Taika Waititi, so it's going to be
so
awesome.
We know it's going to be hysterical. So
it can't help but, you know, be awesome. And the show itself is great too. I can't wait for the show to come back.
Yeah.
Tell us about National Treasure.
So fans who have been, you know, looking for clues about the future of National Treasure are in luck. Deadline is reporting that Disney Plus has greenlighted a new TV spin-off series with an order for 10 episodes. The new series will hand the reins of the expansion of the action-adventure franchise over to a new Latina lead named Jessie Morales. The 20-year-old dreamer Jess, along with her friends, will become involved in a new adventure revolving around the mysteries of her family tree while discovering some hidden treasure along the way. You'll recall that Disney Plus series had been in the works for the streaming service now. There was actually news about this last May that was kind of teased because the franchise producer, Jerry Bruckheimer, had said that they were actually looking at doing a third movie, but they were also looking at doing a television series as well. He had said, we're certainly working on one for streaming and we're working on one for the big screen. So hopefully they'll both come together and we'll be bringing another National Treasure to both screens. So from what they were talking about, the theatrical version will reprise the cast from the original movies, but the television series will actually be a much younger cast going on different adventures. So I don't think they had, there's no confirmed dates yet, but obviously more will be coming out, you know, as it becomes, as, you know, they start filming and whatnot. So,
and I see this as good news because they're fixing the one single biggest problem.
I knew you were going to go there.
That I think the movies had, because the movies were actually pretty good, but they had Nicolas Cage. So by pulling Nicolas Cage out and putting literally anybody else in there.
Well, it sounds like it'll be almost like a young adult version.
Oh, like a young Indiana Jones, because that series went well.
I like that.
It didn't last very long. And
whatever.
We know what happened to the star of it.
Well, yeah. Anyway.
So hopefully it's better than that.
Right.
And
So
and
it kind of
ends
sounds
better.
like that's, where it's they're not going to be on the same journey or looking for the same items, but this kind of the same.
because they already found the other items.
Right. They're already right. Gotcha.
So you don't need to find them again, right?
Right.
It's
We
like,
already
you
know
know,
where it is.
Why is it the last place you look is the place where you find it? Well, because you don't keep looking after you find it, right? So it's got to be the last place. Anyway, I think that was it for our entertainment news and for
Sure
my
was.
poor attempt at a comedy sketch here. We'll be right back with our insightful picks. Go for your insightful pick.
So my insightful pick happened to be something that I came across on Disney Plus. As we've mentioned before, our daughter and I, we have our TV time every night where we would watch different movies, different TV shows. We actually had just finished Dinosaurs, the series from the late 90s, or the early 90s, I should say. So that we just finished up the other day, and I was looking for something else to find, and I saw this, show, and I was like, let's start watching it. And it's called The Secret of Sulphur Springs. It's streaming on Disney Plus, and it's an American horror mystery television series. It actually premiered in January of 2021. The series is set in a fictional Louisiana town of Sulphur Springs. So after his dad gets a new job, 12-year-old Griffin Campbell moves into the closed down and dilapidated Tremont hotel in Sulphur Springs, Louisiana, which is supposedly haunted by Savannah Dillon, a camper at the Tremont camp who disappeared 30 years ago. With his new best friend Harper from his school, Griffin discovers a portal which takes the two back in time 30 years to 1990. I think that was
That's so long ago.
that was the part that kind of killed me. I'm like, they're going back to 1990? That was 30 years ago? Ugh. And when they do that, they meet and find out what's happening to Savannah Dillon and try and save her from disappearing. It's kind of reminiscent of the different like Nickelodeon mystery shows that the little Goosebumps and Who's Afraid of the Dark or Are You Afraid of the Dark, that kind of thing. So wasn't sure if our daughter was gonna like it because she's not really into the horror or the mystery thing, but it's not too over the top. And it's definitely more mystery. Like you find out that not everything, what the parents said happened didn't really happen. Everybody kind of has a secret. So she's really enjoying it, which is nice. And it's something, different out of the norm for what we would normally watch. So probably meant for a little bit older, teenage, 10, 11, as long as they're not afraid of spooky sounds or whatnot. But half-hour episodes. I want to say there's maybe 8 or 9 episodes to the season. No word if this is like a one and done. But we're definitely enjoying it. And the one thing was on DisneyNow.com, they actually have little snippets that you can watch after each episode where they have cast members talking about what had happened on the show and their theories about what's going forward in the next episode. So a nice little add-on for those watching the show.
Cool. Nice pick.
Thank you.
So my pick this week is a pick that is a documentary on Hulu called Back in Time. We're big fans of Back to the Future. We recently had our daughter watch the trilogy there, and she liked it too. So Back in Time is an amazing look at the immense cultural impact of the Back to the Future trilogy 30 years. And so this is this is a
1990.
This is a 2015 documentary.
Okay.
So it's a few years old. So it's a look at the cultural impact of the Back to the Future trilogy 30 years after McFly and Brown went on an epic adventure. A look at the very real impact the Back to the Future movies have had on our culture. What was once a little idea that spawned a tightly focused documentary has grown into something truly amazing over 2 years of filming. Back in Time is a cinematic monument to the vastness of the trilogy's fandom. In addition to the footage and interviews revolving around the time machine itself, the DeLorean, the crew found that simply by delving into the impact of the trilogy, an epic journey began to unfold before them. So the documentary itself was something that they started out almost like a fan project, like a Kickstarter backed fan project thing to put something together, and that turned into a monumental journey. The crew captured countless hours of footage during filming, from Steven Spielberg to Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, to the Shays and Hollers, and from James Tolkien and Leah Thompson to Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox. Back in Time features interviews after interview that simply must be seen. And that's kind of what blew my mind, is they had such access to all the stars. They would go to fan conventions that happen across the world, really.
Okay.
Because the one that they did was down in, I think, Australia. And they would talk to the people that attend these. And, they went not just Back to the Future conventions, they went to DeLorean conventions.
Oh, okay.
And they talked to people, like the community itself of people that buy the roughly 3,000 DeLoreans that survive, and try to turn them into time machines.
Okay.
And they talked to this one husband and wife who actually were volunteers for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And the husband had been diagnosed. He was given 6 months to live. And they decided that they wanted to buy a DeLorean. He that was his bucket list. He wanted his DeLorean and wanted to turn it into a time machine. And like 8 years later, the man is still going because of the passion of what that project did for them. They've driven had a mission once they built this DeLorean to drive it to all 50 states, which they've accomplished doing. And they've raised countless amounts of money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's. And it was just their story alone would have made the documentary worth it. But they go into all the festivals that happen. Like there's one that was in New Zealand where they recreate the town. Oh, wow. Complete with the houses. So you walk through Biff Tannen's house and each person's house. And it's neat because when you park out in the parking lot, and when you walk through, they created Peabody's farm. And you walk through the farm and they have farm animals and everything. And then you come into the town square everyone watched the movie in the town square, and they did a play. It was really well done. It was not your typical type of documentary. But the thing that really gave it the gravitas was the fact that you had people like Michael J. Fox featured in here, Leah Thompson, Christopher Lloyd, Robert Zemeckis. They all made time
to be part of,
no pun intended, but to be a part of this documentary. And it was a really well done documentary. Totally blew my mind. So Back in Time is streaming now on Hulu. We'll be right back with some afterthoughts. So where are we going?
So obviously we know that San Diego Comic-Con is still going to be virtual this year. But one of the little conventions that is usually in our area, Monster Mania, they usually hold it twice a year. They are doing something a little different this year. They are doing Monster Mania's mini little mall of horrors. They're actually doing it at a different location than they normally do. It's actually going to be in Oaks, Pennsylvania, at the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Expo Center. And this is actually a location that we've gone to for other different events. But what's neat about this is not only is it going to be a little shopping center is they're also going to have some celebrities there. So it's kind of like a miniature convention. Tickets are just $13 a day. As of right now, Saturday is completely sold out. They are limiting the amount of people. You do have to buy your tickets in advance. Obviously, social distancing is asked and masks are required. It's the first time ever that they're doing this little outdoor mall of horrors. And they're doing it on Saturday, May 22nd and Sunday, May 23rd. They will have over 150 vendors in a large 6-acre paved fairground. Vendors have been waiting since March of last year to do any sort of show. So this is kind of going to be interesting, different. Kind of an outside version. Normally, Monster Mania is held in one of the local hotels in Cherry Hill, and it's usually very packed and very crowded. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this goes. We did buy tickets because we're jonesing for
desperate
something.
to get to a convention.
So it's usually it's a convention that we go to. Not necessarily to see any of the celebrities, usually to, walk around and just be among other people. So we did buy tickets already. So it should be interesting to see, maybe we'll film some of it, for a later show. And maybe depending on how successful this is, maybe it'll be something they continue to do, a couple times a year. So we'll see.
What else we got?
So another thing that kind of popped up was obviously we see a lot of bands that have been coming out and doing online concerts, different streaming events. But this was one that popped up. Bare Naked Ladies is going to be doing a little concert. It's not a full concert. It's actually going to be just an hour, and they're calling it Flippin' Hits with BNL, a night of monster jams of a pandemic proportions. It's a streaming event that's only going to be played once. They're not going to be doing any post-broadcast viewing of it. It'll be a 60-minute greatest hits concert that they filmed in Toronto. What's nice about it, though, is they have a whole bunch of different ticket prices, and the cheapest one is actually $15. So really not that expensive. I think there was one that was $30 that included a copy of their greatest hits CD along with a ticket to the show. So the concert is going to be on April 17th at 9:00. So if anybody is a Bare Naked Ladies fan and you're looking for a concert, obviously not to go to because, again, everybody's social distancing, at least you can get some sort of music entertainment.
Nice. So a couple of little things that might be signaling a little bit of return to normalcy here.
Yeah.
And we've got what was the other convention that was coming up that they were splitting?
Well, that was San Diego, where they were going to be doing the virtual,
and then they're doing,
and then possibly
later.
something,
yeah.
And then supposedly the summer ZoloCon is supposed to be, which ZoloCon usually for our area usually would be in February. They're looking at a July date. So we'll see. And I think what you're going to see is for any of the conventions or any of the shows, kind of like with anything else, you're going to have to buy your ticket in advance. You're going to have to buy it ahead of time. A little bit more
planning, a little bit more prep.
Right. You're not going to be able to just the day of, hey, let me go and see. They're not going to let people in, or they'll do time tickets, so that not everybody is coming in. So you'll probably see that, for the next little while. But at least it's something.
We're getting there.
So we're
right?
getting there.
We're getting there. And I think that was all we had today. Before we go, I would ask folks once again to subscribe to the podcast. If you subscribe, you'll get it first thing Monday morning at 8 when they go live. You can get the video versions of our podcast. If you look up Insights into Things, you'll get the video versions of all the network's podcasts. Audio versions of this podcast you can find under Insights into Entertainment. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, any place you can get a podcast. And we also, again, ask you to reach out to us. Give us your feedback. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com.
You can find us on Twitter at insights_things.
We stream 6 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings.
You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast.
The audio versions of this podcast can be found at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com.
You can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings.
High-res versions of our videos can be found on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings.
And you can find us on the web with links to everything for all of our different podcasts at insightsintothings.com.
That's it. Another one in the books.
Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow, where we take a deeper look into how the issues of today will impact the world of tomorrow. From politics and world news to media and technology, we discuss how today's headlines are becoming tomorrow's reality.
Welcome to Insights into Tomorrow. This is episode 9, Entertainment a la carte. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my co-host, Sam Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Doing all right. So, aside for the landscapers that we're dealing with here, but that's okay. So this week we decided to sort of ratchet it down a few notches. We've been having last couple of podcasts we've been doing some pretty heavy-hitting timely subjects, and with the election not too far away, we knew we were probably going to be doing another heavy-hitting one to cover that. So this week we're going to do something a little more lighthearted, a little more fun, and a little less dipped in controversy, I guess I could say.
Yeah, so if you're filling out your bingo cards about how we're going to get to the end of the world by the end of this, I don't know if you're going to win this time. But we'll see.
Hopefully we won't have doom and gloom by the end of the show like we usually do. So this week we're talking entertainment a la carte. And when I say that, there has been a desire by consumers for a very long time now to have entertainment the way they want it at their fingertips when they want it. We've had different false starts, different incarnations, different hopes that we've seen through the industry. So today we're going to take a look at sort of what the history of what we've had, what we've got today, and where we think we're going to be going in the future as far as what our command over our entertainment is going to be. Before we do that, though, I did want to invite folks to subscribe to the podcast. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and now on Amazon. So you can convince your Echo devices to listen to our podcasts. I would also invite folks to reach out to us, tell us if we're doing a good job, what you'd like us to talk about. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can hit us on Twitter at insights_things. You can catch high-res versions of our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 6 days a week, this week 7 days a week, on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. You can catch our audio versions of the podcast at podcast.insightsintotomorrow.com. You can reach out to us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast, or you can get links to all of our social media on our website at insightsintothings.com. Ready to get into it?
Yes.
All right. So first up, I just wanted to sort of kind of summarize what we're looking at when it comes to entertainment here, and how important entertainment is in the home. But before we do that, let me ask you, Sam, what aspects of entertainment are important to you? Do you listen to music? Do you stream videos? Do you watch movies? What's your prescription for your entertainment?
I'd say I mostly watch, I watch a lot of YouTube. Like I follow a lot of channels and watch content on there. And then from there, it's probably like Netflix. I don't really watch live TV at all anymore, unless it's like a football game or something. And even then I'm only watching 20 to 30 minutes. So for me, it's definitely mostly YouTube, podcasts, like things on Stitcher. I listen to a lot of things on there. Netflix. They're like the big three for me.
So what about radio? I know, with the college and everything that you have, you have a presence on broadcast radio. Do you listen to broadcast radio yourself much?
If I'm in the car, like on the car road over here, I definitely listen to it. Like I don't have Bluetooth in the car or anything like that. I'll put on, sports talk radio or MMR or something like that. Other than that, I don't really just tune on the radio just for fun. Like in the mornings when I'm getting ready, I'm usually listening to a podcast. It's not so much the radio. When I was younger, I used to do that a lot until I got into podcasts. Sometimes, if I'm taking a shower, I'll put the radio on. But overall, I'd say not really that often. It's mostly in the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about movies? Do you own DVDs or Blu-rays, or do you stream most of your movies today?
I'm mostly streaming. I mean, I'd say probably like 30 to 40 maybe Blu-rays and a couple, 4Ks and things like that. Movies that I really want to have, the physical copy of, movies that are special to me, or movies that I just like a lot, or movies that I got on sale for
Right.
Blu-rays, because Amazon does Blu-ray sales all the time. So things like that. I don't have I wouldn't say my Blu-ray collection is like my pride and joy. But it's mostly just to have those physical copies, just in case, I can't get The Lord of the Rings on, Netflix because they take it off all the time or something like that.
Right. So it sounds like a good chunk of what you do is some of the more modern technologies then.
Mm-hmm.
What about when you listen to radio? Is it talk shows you listen to? Is it music that you listen to, or you listen to the sports radio?
Yeah, I mostly do sports talk. 94.1 for our local area. That's like the sports. And then there's 97.5 too. I'll alternate between those. I don't really listen to music that much. I don't know. Something about hearing people talk and discuss. I just like to listen to that more than, a song I can pull up on my phone.
As a podcaster, that's exactly what I like to hear.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to not hear my own voice. It's nice to hear other people talk for a while.
Absolutely. So, we've had various forums, and we're going to talk about the history of some of these forums in a little bit there. But obviously, our entertainment started out as purely live entertainment. If you went, back in the 1800s and in the beginning of the 1900s, if you wanted to be entertained, you either produced music or entertainment at home, or you went to go see it somewhere. Radio finally allowed us to bring it in the house. Then we moved from that naturally, almost, through evolution through to TV. Then we started to have home entertainment systems, VCRs, DVDs, and so forth, followed eventually by streaming. But it was basically force-fed to you. So when you would listen to the radio, you would have a schedule of things that you would listen to. And if you missed your show, you missed it, right? So we started getting specialized radio stations. That's where we get the sports talk radio.
Yeah, formats.
Yeah, you get your specialized formats. I remember, as a kid back in the 70s, when you would listen to the radio, you would hear every genre of music on a radio station. You didn't even have specialized target audiences back in the 70s. You didn't start getting that until mid-80s, late 80s. And TV channels started doing the same thing. I'm going to sound like my father at this point, but, going back to when I was a kid, we didn't have cable. We had broadcast television. You had 3, 6, and 10 in our area. CBS, ABC, and NBC. And if you were lucky, you'd get a PBS station. But outside of that, that was what your entertainment was. We've come a long way since then.
Yeah, we've gone the complete opposite way. Now people can have access to everything, which I think a lot of people realize is too much.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And what happened was when we got to the point